interpretation to what do I mean by me as a realist. So if I see Stalin's, the reason why he moved into Berlin, West Berlin, if I take this idea of expansionist policy and its security together, actually this is the idea about this thing called offensive realism. So in order to protect myself, I had to be aggressive. So if I take away, like another example, do you know that actually Singapore's defense policy is actually, we apply this idea called offensive realism. In fact, you go look at Singapore war games, okay, their war plans, okay, most likely we envision that if we are being in war, there are only two possible enemies, either Malaysia or Indonesia. But when you look at history, they concluded that most of the time, if there is a war, the likelihood of having a war with Malaysia is higher. So, in the event that if tensions is going to be too high, Singapore, when we want to defend ourselves, we will attack Johor first, and we will build a perimeter in Johor, so that you fight the war in Johor and not bring it to Singapore. And in the event that if it attack us, offensive realism, this is where, you know that Singapore has bases in Brunei, in Australia?
Yeah.
So this is where, if there's a need, they'll send reinforcement from Brunei and Australia to start and circumvent that sense. So this is where you talk about expansionist policy. But there's another kind of realism called defensive realism. So if I go about this fears for security, do you think his fears is legitimate? No? Yeah, okay, if you say it's gas, do you have any examples to support it? I think the video kind of mentioned it, right? Something must have triggered Stalin to want to initiate the Berlin blockade. I mean, this expansionist policy is not something that is new. They've already done that in 1945.
Was it the
West Berlin being like
is the money
more well off than
is the
West Berlin being more well off?
hyperinflation? They were having hyperinflation than the other side.
Hyperinflation. So actually, you can recall
Economic reasons.
when I say about fear of security, technically, and my connotation, what I'm trying to phrase it in the sense that this person will argue, would possibly be saying that USA or the West was the aggressor. And when you look at, in the context of Berlin, what kind of policies were they being aggressive? It was basically the currency reforms. Because this currency reforms, basically the thing about it is trying. Hey, hi Noah. We're getting too comfortable. So basically, this currency reform, from Stalin's point of view, is just another way of you, in Stalin's POV, currency reform is just spreading capitalism. You are just using West Berlin as a base. Once you maintain order already, you develop the country's economy, okay? Then you'll use that to spread your capitalist tendencies and ideologies from West Berlin and spread it all around to East Germany and Eastern Europe. So technically, this spreading of capitalism, it fulfills this idea of its fears for security. Right, because if you look at the geography of West Berlin, technically it's being seen as an island of capitalism. So it's quite interesting in the sense that even though we all sort of wiped out, almost everyone said that Stalin was the one that started it. But technically, if you take from different perspectives, actually both sides have their fault. Which comes to the third reason actually. Isn't it a conflicting national or security interest? And is the significance of Germany, of Berlin? Right. is because Berlin is the capital of Germany. Okay? Technically, it holds that added significance where, if you can recall, Germany is like a buffer zone. Conflicting national security interests. So both sides, they do not want to give up the parts that they own in Berlin to the other side. Because once one side has total complete control, technically the balance of power will tilt to the other side. So this is also another reason why, this also I'm trying to recap with you, why I keep yapping about historical debates. You can see here, point 1, technically subscribes to traditional. Point 2, subscribe to revisionist. Point 3, easily is a revisionist. So this point 3, I talk about conflicting national security interests, is because of the fact that they see of the significance of Berlin. Both sides are unwilling to back down. One, they want, for Stalin's point of view, it needs to expand to get rid of this threat. For USA perspective, I see as you being aggressive, you are trying to take away the territories that I own, force me out, and you are trying to spread your communist ideas of sense. And therefore, I cannot let it go. I have to use Berlin airlift to stop what you are doing in sense. Right. So technically, this example of Berlin blockade, you can use it for a lot of your arguments. It depends on how you phrase it. Okay? Questions before I move on to the next point. If not, I have one question for Ahmad. Huh? Yeah, I was looking at people's questions, right? Technically, I have a question. Because just now, Fintan Poetry asked me, why was Stalin so dumb?
Oh, and video was banned. Video was banned.
Why was Stalin so dumb that he could not foresee that the USA will retaliate using airlift? Because if you watch the video, technically the premise is that both sides are unwilling to start a war. So they're actually applying this thing called brinksmanship, where they just add a bit more pressure and throw the ball to the other side. They want the other side to start, to be the one that fired the first shot. So why didn't Stalin, when he do Berlin blockade, foresee that, USA will retaliate using Berlin airlift? In a sense. Because the moment when USA used its airlift to airlift supply, Stalin would not dare to shoot down the plane, because if they shoot down the plane, that's a declaration of war. And basically, if they didn't shoot, they already called the bluff already. So why didn't Stalin foresee that and continue on with the blockade when they first planned for the blockade?
That's really hard to foresee.
Hard to foresee.
If you're flying over their territory, what's wrong with shooting it down?
Because then it's a declaration of war.
Yeah. The moment you shoot it down, it's a declaration of war.
But it's not. They are not. No, but it's not really their territory.
So I can tell you.
airspace.
What's so bad? What's so bad?
They have to fly over Soviet US
It's not a war,
airspace.
it's
Sure,
a-
but it implies a more
It's like if Japan,
it will still increase that.
it's like if you don't have permission, right, and you're unauthorized, Japan plane fly over Singapore, Singapore.
No.
Yeah.
The plane was
Why,
West Berlin. It was
everyone
believed
wants to
that
give
West
me a-
Berlin would belong to the Allied powers.
Intelligent guys, yes. Planes are very close. What do you mean that planes are very expensive?
Planes cost money.
Costly, and then so what? It's about costly.
They didn't expect the West to have that much resources.
Much resources, a bit more than that.
Border to
Why spend so much?
To lower the
country's economy.
economy.
Economy. So actually, you are hitting close.
It's not humbling Stalin.
so isn't it the West is more?
Basically,
So
for Stalin, he's banging on the idea whether is this airlift sustainable in the first place. Therefore, you can see yes.
The winter,
If you
yeah.
recall the video, actually, to be honest, even if the USA retaliated with the airlift, what USSR is banging on is actually on the idea that USA will not be able to sustain this massive airlift for a long period of time. So what he's actually playing is this so-called war of attrition. And you look at it, all wars are actually war of attrition. They're all competing on whether who can last longer, even though they know that ultimately the so-called war, be it Berlin blockade or other kinds of war like the Russian-Ukraine war, both sides will eventually be the losers. So ultimately, if you look at it, when they realized that, hey, USA can pull through it, there's no reason for them, I think in 1949, to end the Berlin blockade already. Because technically, you think about it, their objective was actually to seize West Berlin for whatsoever reason that we talk about it. When they see that the USA are able to sustain for about 15 months or 11 months, you can't count the math, about close to a year of airlift, and West Berlin could still survive, technically it's gone already. Your policy objective is really not able to achieve. Then there's no point in following that agony already. Right. Therefore, technically, this leads me to the last point. Was the Berlin blockade a turning point? What is a turning point?
It flipped the switch.
Flip the switch. What do you mean flip the switch?
Like as in like it went past the line between what's considered okay and what's not okay. I don't know.
Then elaborate further. What do you mean by what's okay and what's not okay?
Like okay was probably the agreement to split Germany and also Berlin into 4 sectors. That was agreed upon. But then there was like still a bit tension because of the differing ideologies. But then this Berlin blockade was the last straw kind of.
Last straw as in?
It was the final signal that signaled to like the Allied powers that we cannot cooperate and I don't like you.
Okay, I'm not sure if you are able to hear Kejun's answer. Basically to him, the so-called turning point, if I say that Berlin blockade is a turning point, is the idea that if you look at the trajectory before Berlin blockade, when both sides they are unhappy with one another, what they do are just policies targeting against one another, be it in the political aspect of Truman Doctrine, or Comintern, or Cominform, or economic, Marshall Plan, Comecon. But for Berlin blockade, it's actually the first time where there is a very real likelihood that there will be a war. Can you wake him up?
It's fine, you pull through in the end.
Wait, so basically, if you would see that in that sense, technically, for some people will argue that it's a turning point because that really marks the start of the Cold War. Okay, and I'm not sure if you managed to catch the video. I think the second one, it actually marks how this so-called Cold War conflict would actually materialize for the next 4 decades. So it's the idea that the brinksmanship where both are giving threats, but both sides are unwilling to really fight a real war in a sense. Okay? So technically, you can consider that as a turning point. So I was talking to Martian Piston 403 just now. They use a very math illustration. When people say turning point, what we're all studying math, right? Maximum minimum point, right? They argue that turning point is a maximum point. Okay?
Wrong.
But wrong.
It keeps
Wrong.
fluctuating, but
It
it's
keeps
like generally
fluctuating.
in the
Wrong.
what that increases.
Turning point can be minimum point.
It could be a minimum point. Fair enough. Therefore, what if, so I was challenging them,
And it was a
what
sign.
if actually, your Berlin blockade is
sign
only
code.
just one spark plug? It says that, yeah.
Oh, that's
That's a-
a
that's a tangent.
cubic equation, no?
The tangent curve.
Oh, it's a
cubic,
tangent curve.
It's a tangent tilted on the x-axis.
BB. Oh.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to point to you is that, the Berlin blockade, when I say that it's a turning point, yes, it's close to a war. I was talking to Terence. In fact, but are you really surprised that such a situation happened in 1948? Not really. Wait, although you will beg to differ. I'm trying to impress upon him the idea that, actually think about it, this Berlin blockade is just a manifestation of what has already been built up in terms of tension since 1945. Where it was only until Berlin blockade where it's very close to fighting in that sense, fighting it out. Then afterwards, that tension will go even further when you look at Korean War, Cuban Missile Crisis. So technically, one could also argue that technically your Berlin blockade is not really a turning point.
Cuban Missile Crisis.
But
Will Russia ever try?
perhaps a turning point that failed to turn.
How 2020 The 2021
Yeah. So this idea of a turning point that failed to turn, this idea of turning point is really up to how you define turning point. So turning point, usually in history, we don't really talk about what maximum points, a high points, a climax or something, but it's something that
Affect the trajectory.
affect a trajectory, something that weighs significance. And how do I weigh significance? It's really up to you to define the significance. So there are a lot of historians who argue that if you are interested to take HL history, you definitely study about 1848 revolutions. One famous historian argued that 1848 revolution was a turning point that failed to turn. Although it seems like a very big thing, people overthrowing the monarchy, but in a few years' time, everything was being reversed. The so-called successors in 1848 revolution. So it's a turning point that failed to turn. I don't know.
Is that the French Revolution? What's the
Technically, yeah, French Revolution. You can consider it as a turning point that failed to turn. Okay? So, to end off, I was looking at one real life issue. I'm not sure if you are aware, technically,
Oh,
your Berlin blockade, if you look at today's geopolitics in that sense, basically, China is playing a second Stalin, you know. Because if you have been following about Chinese-Taiwanese relationship, China has always said that Taiwan is, part of China, and they will not hesitate to use force to liberate Taiwan in that sense. So whenever Taiwan is under the very pro-independence party in charge as government, they actually, for the Chinese part, for the past few years, they have been trying to do war drills all around Taiwan. And these are the recent war drills that, their main goal is that if I want to attack Taiwan, I will cordon off Taiwan to have a blockade in a sense.
they did it when the US.
Once I block Taiwan, I starve them to death for a month, then I'll attack them. So this is where, if US is really very close with his allies, true to his words that they will come to defend Taiwan,
I'm sure Trump not going to defend Taiwan.
then you will see a second Berlin alliance happening in your life. If not,
A bit far.
a bit far, not exactly though.
US to Taiwan.
By the way, US has bases near in Philippines, Japan and stuff. So you want to do your airlift from there. And if you do an airlift, technically, the ball is back to China's court. Are they willing to shoot down US planes? If they are willing to shoot down US planes, 3, yeah. If not, bye.
Okay, his career is over.
I feel like he will. You can end it now, but
Sure.